Ready for step 2. We've painted everything with our silver metallic paint, our Metalicious, and we're ready to mix our top coat now. This is the pretty part that goes over the top, and I'll just call it goop because that's pretty much what it is. And it's a mixture of 3 different things. The first of which is called Shine On, and this one is called Rockin' Red. That's the color of this one, is Rockin' Red. So we're going to take a big glob of Rockin' Red. Now, this is not mixing a color. This is just mixing a consistency. If you're mixing a color for something or creating a color, then you have to be very careful to be sure you mix enough for the entire job. And because then you don't want to have to remix that color. But with this, the color stays consistent. So all you have to do is mix enough to work with for a little while. And if you have to mix more, that's okay. So we're just going to start out with enough. And notice I'm mixing in a pan that I can roll from. So I don't have to transfer this into this pan. I'm just going to mix it in here and mix it enough to use at one time. We don't have to get gallons and gallons of this. It doesn't take a whole lot to go do the job that we're doing. Now, sometimes I'll use plastic spoons and sometimes trowels. Sometimes it just depends. But with this, I like to use a kitchen spatula. Now, our second part of what we're mixing together is tintable glaze. And this is just to soften it, to make it more paintable. I want it to roll for me with a roller. So that's going to change the consistency quite a bit. So mix that in a little bit. And you really just have to keep stirring until you get the thinner product mixed in completely with the thicker product. You already have a little bit of shine with your Shine On product. It obviously has some metallic quality to it. And because this is such a shimmery kind of finish in that we want it to look like raw silk, we're going to mix a little bit more metallic in there. I just want to be absolutely sure that that sheen really comes through and that the light really plays off of it. So our third thing that we're going to mix in here is our metallic paint. Again, that's called Metalicious. And this color is a red and it's called You Naughty Girl. I told you before we like to have fun with our names here because there's nothing better than a color with a great name. It's like fingernail polish or lipstick. If it has a great name, that's so much more fun. Now we keep mixing, and this might take you a minute until everything is all mixed together. And if you noticed, I did about the same amount of glaze as Shine On. They were about equal. And then maybe 4 or 5 tablespoons of the metallic You Naughty Girl paint. And that's just enough to give it a little bit of sheen. And it's thinner in consistency too than the Shine On. So it's going to give it still a little bit more of that liquid feel and make it more rollable. It might still be a little lumpy, but that's okay. Our finish is, well, remember, what we're going for is a look that looks like raw silk. So it's going to have some little knots and places in it. Now, what I've got here is a roller that has some nap to it. It's not very large. It doesn't have to be a big paint roller. It would be way too much to try to work with. We're going to get that all over. So we're going to work in some small sections. The first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm moving forward here to show you on your sample board, because if you have a kit, you're going to work with a sample board first. But what I'm going to do is do the sample board, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about taping and doing this on your wall in just a minute. But just for this segment here, and just to show you exactly how to use the product, we're going to do a sample board first. All right, so we have enough on our roller. And here's our sample board. Remember, we painted this with our Metalicious paint. And we're going to cover right over it. And it's going to look as though we're covering up what we did before. And that is okay for now because we're going to make that go away in just a second. We're going to give it all of its character in just a minute. So go over your entire sample board. And this is what you're going to do on your wall in a minute, but first I'm going to just do the sample board. I want to give you the idea how we're going to do this, and then we're going to move to the wall and show you how to actually apply it. Sample boards are one thing, but when you get to the walls it gets a little tricky sometimes. Okay, so we have 100% coverage all over the section that we want to do, all over our sample board. And then we take our wallpaper brush. That's all this is just a plain wallpaper brush, and obviously this one's been used a couple of times. In fact, the more they're used, the better they are. So if you, and I can tell what just happened is that some of my little pieces are falling out. So I'm going to make sure, and anytime you're using a brush you haven't used in a long time, or a tool you haven't used in a long time, or even a brand new one, it's a good idea to do this beforehand. Make sure you get all those loose pieces out so they don't come off in your finish. Okay, so we're going to take our wallpaper brush and we're going to start at the top, and which looks like the bottom to you, and we're going to slide it through our finish. And I'm just going to wipe it off right there. And we're going to slide it through. Now notice I'm overlapping what I just did, and that's okay because we're just creating lines all the way across. Now this is pretty enough, and you can leave it just in this one direction. If you're going from the top of your walls to the bottom, you can just leave it like this. What creates though is these little nap right here, which makes it look like raw silk. Some of those are going to get created like that, and some of them will do that by tapping. So we're going to do that too. The other thing that makes it look like real fabric is going the other direction and then coming back. So if you're on your wall, and we'll show you again in a minute, you want to come back across and then decide what direction you want your fabric to go in. I want it to go like this. So I'm going to come across, but I'm going to go back the other way in a minute. So you can see what's being created is just like when fabric is woven together. It obviously goes in two different directions. So the lines that I did first are still hidden under there, and then the lines coming across are giving it more of a fabric look. Now on my final brush through, I'm going to come back this way, and I'm a little bit lighter handed this time, not pressing quite as hard. And I can do this as many times as I want to remove as much paint as I want, or leave as much on. And when you're on the wall, you can tap off some of that excess that builds up here to create some of those little naps, those little pills, I guess you would call them, whatever it is that's in actual raw silk. Okay, and there's our final finish.